Good morning, Mayfield Baptist. It's good to be here and it's good to see your faces from this angle. Am I online okay? Am I going tss or anything? We really owe you musicians a huge thank you. And you owe me an apology as well. You're not supposed to make me cry just before I get the microphone. Welcome. And as has already been said, if you're here for the first time or you're here for the first time in a long time, thank you for coming or coming back. And if you're here and you're not even quite sure why you turned up and whether God exists or matters, good on you for doing your own research. And please ask those questions and keep asking them. We're continuing our generosity series, and a few weeks ago Andrew kicked us off with there's more joy in giving than receiving, and reminded us that 25% of what Jesus talked about had to do with money. I didn't hear that till I was probably a Christian in my 20s, and I thought, that's not true. Really? You know, he told stories like about the Good Samaritan and stuff, who pulled out his wallet at the end of the story and handed over money. He told the story about the sower and the seeds, and some of the seeds got challenged and gobbled up by the worries of this world and financial problems. Yeah, Jesus really did talk a lot about money. And then Marg talked about watch out for greed. And I don't know if those of you who are here remember Marg had a graphic of a frog in a pot, and that analogy of the true thing, that if the pot's heated up really slowly, the frog ends up dying, doesn't jump out. It's at the point that they could jump out, and how that is like our society is moulding and shaping us ever so subtly and ever so continuously until we're done by it. And then last week we had Mother's Day, and if you weren't here for Mother's Day, then get on the internet, and if you don't know how, find someone who doesn't have grey hair to tell you how, and watch, because it was great, wasn't it? You know, the wisdom per minute from that panel, boy oh boy, so rich. It was great. So today, as Lockie said, the theme is all we have belongs to God. Oh, there it is, it works, fantastic. So a quick anecdote from a 2002 movie that's at least one other person in this room will have seen, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Do you remember the scene where it's a romantic comedy and this American Greek woman falls for this Anglo-Saxon American man, and she knows it's just not going to go down with Dad, and she's really sad about it, and she talks to Mum about it and she says, Dad is the head of the house. I've got one for that, haven't I? And wait. Dad is the head of the house. He will never agree to this. And her mum, who was on her side in the issue, said, do not worry. It is true in our Greek culture. The man is the head of the house, but the woman is the neck. And the neck can move the head any way it wants to. We will come back to that later on. Now, I was told by somebody to be, brief today, and I couldn't figure out a way to do it. So I promise I'll stop when the rain stops. And I've got a pretty long introduction before I want to dive into the actual meat of the question. There's several things I want to say as, preliminary things. The first is this morning I'm breaking my own rule, a rule I made for myself a long time ago. Once you become a doctor, don't ever give a talk about money to anybody. Asking a doctor to give a talk about money is like asking Vladimir Putin to give a talk about how to be a good neighbour. You are the wrong person to be giving that talk, Vladimir. It's like asking a 14-year-old boy, no matter how articulate he is, to give a talk about how to handle the pain of childbirth. and the symptoms of menopause. You want to hear about money from someone who understands what it's like to not have much money, what it's like to be paid or not paid at all or not have a job and struggle. So I said, don't ever do it. But I said yes, and here we are. The second thing is, I'm going to show you a quote from Jesus in a minute, and there's a blank in it. Now, many of you will know exactly what goes in the blank, but some of you will be struggling to remember or might not have seen it before. So don't say it out loud like someone over here just did about the Greek quote. Just ponder it for a sec. So this is repeated 3 times in the Gospels. Matthew, Mark and Luke all have it, and they all say almost exactly the same sentence from Jesus. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is to enter... I said, don't say it. We're going to be here a long time, aren't we? Liar, murderer, mass murderer, no, adulterer, cheat, atheist, narcissist. No, it says a rich person. I find this to be one of the most haunting verses in the Bible. I had 16 years between leaving high school and getting my first paycheck as a doctor. And I was lucky enough in that time to travel, including to Nepal, long before I ever, ended up loving the country and being part of it. And it was very clear to me that we Australians are amazingly wealthy, very wealthy. And that when I even went through a period of unemployment in the 1980s, I was still living a life that was probably more comfortable than Solomon lived, and certainly more powerful than Solomon lived. And we live in Nepal about half our life and have done, for the last 17 years. And many of our friends don't have running water in their house and they don't have a toilet in their house, and they're relatively well-off people with jobs and stuff locally. And I've said that many times from here with this microphone, and that's not to make any of us feel guilty. I think we can go back as far as when we had an overhead projector here, and I remember saying, we don't talk about those things bluntly like that to make people feel guilty. But G, not for guilty, G for grateful that we have so much, that we are so blessed. And today I'm going to add another G, generosity. That's why we've ended up with so much stuff, so that we can be generous. So, you know what comes after this, don't you? The disciples say, that's too hard. That's ridiculous. This is impossible. Who on earth could enter the kingdom of heaven if it's harder than for a camel to go through the eye of a needle? And Jesus says, with man, all things are not possible, but with God, all things are possible. And that's how it'll happen. And I personally have far too often moved very quickly from that statement of Jesus to the next couple, rather than dwelling here and thinking, what does that mean then? What does it mean that being wealthy somehow makes it hard to enter the kingdom of heaven? It means at least one thing, that being wealthy is really dangerous in terms of trying to get into the kingdom of heaven, trying to build a kingdom of heaven, trying to be a follower of Jesus. There's something dangerous about being wealthy. That people who aren't wealthy, they don't face that danger. They face some other danger probably, but not this one. So I think we should stop every now and again and not move on quickly to the reassurance that comes after it, but just sit with that. And the third thing I want to say before we dive in is I am biased. I am biased because of the way I grew up. So the way I grew up, 1960s style, mum stopped work as soon as the first baby was born. Dad had a job, but he was unskilled right through to his retirement. He never moved off the lowest level. But our house was a hospitable house. And I would get into trouble if I was playing in the park across the road and I didn't bring the kids in the park home for lunch. Where are those kids you were playing with? We've got enough Vegemite and white bread for them. Come on, invite them in. And people stayed at our house and we stayed at other people's houses, and hospitality was normal. And that's biased me. And when I left high school, I fell in with a bunch of very idealistic Christians, all of whom worked part-time, so that they could do other things with the other half of their week. So, they mowed lawns and painted fences, and no one had a qualification in that group, but they did labouring type jobs so that on that other day they could teach scripture at school, or they could run the drop-in centre, or they could run Christian camps for kids and homeless kids and study youth work and all that kind of stuff. And that was normal. I was very blessed to be falling in with a group like that. And if you want to know more about that kind of lifestyle and those kind of people, Kathy and Phil are sitting just there, and they know all about it from personal experience of their own lives and the people that the same organisation but in another state to where it happened for me. So I'm biased. I'm also biased because of my experience of living in Nepal. I'm also biased because I live in Australia and grew up in Australia, where constantly I'm being told, you need more, you deserve more, if you have more, you'll be happier, more is better than less, more expensive is better than cheaper, maximise your profit no matter what the cost to you and your family, minimise your tax no matter what the cost to you and your family. Constantly hearing that kind of message from the society that I live in that also biases me in a bad way. All those things are lies, and Marg talked about them very eloquently 2 weeks ago. There's not enough for everyone, get in early. It's a lie. So it's biased me. Not all bias is bad though. Last week with the panel of, Poppy reminded me how biased grandparents are. And they should be biased. And parents, you should be biased, absolutely. That's a good thing. So not all bias is bad. I hope as Christians we end up biased in another kind of a way. So I'm not here as an expert. This is a talk I wrote that I should be sitting and doing, I should be there, and someone, my identical twin, should be here talking to me, which is probably a movie scene as well somewhere. And also, I'm an old school Christian, and I honestly believe in Easter. And at Easter, God figured out a way to forgive us for everything. And that whether I get this right or wrong, whether I'm really good at it or really bad at it, I'm not nervous about how I stand in front of God. I'm one of God's kids because of forgiveness and the generosity of Jesus. Whether I end up being a good person or half good person or a terrible person, I really honestly believe in Easter. Jesus' death and resurrection is the means by which I'm accepted and forgiven. And so whatever I want to talk about today about becoming more like Jesus is inspired not by fear of God, not by thinking, what is God going to say about me? But I'm one of God's kids as well, and I want to be as like Jesus as I can be. Is that clear? Good. All we have belongs to God. The world and all that is in it belong to the Lord. The earth and all who live on it are his. Just one verse out of dozens I could choose from the Bible that remind us that everything belongs to God. And it's pretty obvious, isn't it? As Christians, we believe that the only reason anything exists is because God said, let there be. Let there be a universe. Let it be like this. And here we are. And if there was no God, there would be no universe. There would be no discussion. There would be no us meeting. There would be nothing. Everything that exists only exists because God said, let it be. We were born empty-handed. We will die empty-handed. Everything in between is a temporary situation that we've found ourselves in. There's not much to talk about. We can go home now, can't we? It's pretty simple. Feel free, Jono. Is it that simple? The slippery subject of ownership. Do we really own stuff? We do, at least temporarily. At least most of us think we do, don't we? This is my shirt. I bought it in the streets of Kathmandu, I'm pretty sure. These are my trousers, I think. I hope they are. I think they're too long for Anna. 2-year-olds get it, don't they? 2-year-olds get ownership. When there's 2-year-olds and they've both got the one toy and they're taking it, mine! They only know about 30 or 40 words and one of them's definitely going to be mine. isn't it? When my brother and I fought over a toy and we were both tagging on it, my mum used 1960s parenting style, which was very swift, came with sound effects. There weren't many words involved, and it solved the problem very quickly. And apparently that was really bad for me and screwed me up, psychologically. I've been in counselling for 60 years about it ever since. And my counsellor assures me that as soon as her mortgage is paid off, we won't need any more sessions. Jenny, could you have a look under your chair? Sorry, Linda. What have you found under your chair? $50. $50 note. Is it yours?
No.
How do you know it's not yours?
Because I didn't put it there.
Could have fallen out of your pocket.
I don't think we have that amount of cash. Normally $20 is all that's in our wallet.
Is it his? And listen carefully. How would you know? Don't go down this rabbit warren, but I've been down a rabbit warren in the last few days trying to figure out who owns $50 notes. Now, someone who's... don't give it to Anna. Someone here's bound to be more educated than I am, but I don't think $50 notes actually belong to you. Is that true? They belong to the government, don't they? And the government decides when to put them in and when to replace them. And they could walk in here right now and say, give me that $50 note, it belongs to us. And they would be nice about it and have you a newer one to swap over and stuff. But a $50 note really doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the government. And there are laws. And in fact, you can't actually burn a $50 note anymore because they're plastic. But in the days when you could burn $50 notes, you weren't allowed to. It's actually a criminal offence. And to deface it is a criminal offence. It belongs to somebody else. How interesting. It's a bit messy then. This building, we own it, don't we? No. And the land underneath, we don't own it? Oh, who does own it? Somebody else. I was hoping you'd say we did own it. You've mucked up my talk. And is it us this week, or the people who are going to be here next week, or the people who were here last week? Exactly who? We could hire a surveyor and say, there's a line out there somewhere, isn't there? Just out there. And definitely you don't own the bit on the other side of the line. That's owned by council? State government? Or federal government? Or the king? Or I don't want to get into a very sticky subject, but before we all showed up with white skin, who did it belong to then, and how did it get changed over to our ownership? Slippery subject, ownership. Very slippery. The philosophers have got into this and said, like Plato, one of the Greek philosophers, wrote a book, and in that book of the ideal world, nobody owned anything. Everything was owned by everybody else, like it was all public, if you like. On the other end of the scale, everything's private, You've got to figure out, ask the lawyers and the surveyors and whatever, read the laws of the land, and you'll find out who owns what and whether it's by an individual or a group, and if a group, how you define that group, and if that group But even all of that is still slippery. If things had turned out differently in the 1940s and another country had entered Australia like they were planning to, they wouldn't be interested in saying, the council owns the street and the church owns the building here. It's like, no, it all belongs to us now. We won the war. The concept of owning something's kind of not as robust as we would like to think. And on a scale between, everything should be public and everything should be private, for example, if you want to get too philosophical about it, where's the wise spot? Because nearly every culture's done a bit of both. Just about every culture we've ever heard of. Even, the Indigenous culture as far as we know, it still had some private ownership about stuff. This was my spear, my bucket, whatever. And maybe they were forced to share it or whatever, but every culture had some of one or the other. And so often in the business of swapping between, or trying to find where's the wise place? All of this or all of this? Or often the answer is somewhere, well, a bit of both, somewhere in the middle. So if the argument's about the old way of doing something and the new way of doing something, the wise way is often, well, let's have some of the old and some of the new. Or public, private, or left and right, or whatever. The wise place is often somewhere in the middle with a mixture of both. But sometimes the wise place is like, no, forget that argument altogether. Stop thinking about public and private and that kind of thing, and let's think about it a completely different way and just turn our backs and think of it over there. And I think ownership is one of those ones. For us as Christians, I mean. So Christians are much happier to talk about stewardship. It's not a word you'll find in your Bible unless you've still got a King James. And I think there's only once in the whole of the King James when the word stewardship is used. But in our modern Bibles, we use the word manager or caretaker or trusted leader or something. So a caretaker, for example, of a local football field doesn't own the football field, but is responsible for it. Make sure the grass is cut at the right time. Make sure the toilets are clean and the toilet paper is available. Make sure the drainage works. If there's a problem, alert the owner or the person above them to say, look, the fence has fallen down over there. We need some budget to get that fence fixed again. We need a new sign. Let's concrete this muddy bit, whatever. So they don't own the local footy field, but they are responsible for it. And I think this is a great way for us Christians to think about ownership of our resources. Jesus tells a bunch of parables, and in quite a few of the parables, this idea of stewardship is there. Not because it's a Christian idea, it's just a normal idea in every culture, really. So that, he talks about the vineyard owner going away and putting the manager or the boss or the caretaker or the steward in place to look after it while the owner has disappeared to another country, to another business or something. So as Christians, I think this is a much better way to think about it, and we don't have to get lost down the rabbit hole of public and private and stuff like that. But we do have to ask then, why do I have this stuff in my life? This money in my bank, this books on my shelf, the clothes in my cupboard, if you're lucky enough to own a car, a caravan, whatever. Why do I have it? And not just the money. Why do I have my life experience? What am I supposed to do with that? What about my education? What about my family and my friends? Why are these things here? Or as a church, we can ask, why do we have this stuff? And we've done a whole lot of that. We were in Nepal for lots of those discussions, but we have properties and things, and why do we have them? What are they for? And do we really have them? Or are we just in charge of them for now, for a short time, until the next generation comes through? Well, partly we have them so that we can look after ourselves. I have some money in the bank so that I can feed and clothe and house myself and the people that I am responsible for. And if you're part of a family or you're responsible for children, you have to look after them and feed them and house them and educate them. But our society would say it's all for you. Everything you've got belongs to you, it's yours. See if you can get some more. It's for your comfort, it's for your enjoyment. That's what life's about. It finishes there. But Christianity is countercultural. Christianity says that's what the culture says, but there are other ways to think about these things. It's not just all for you, and it's not yours anyway. It belongs to God. So I don't own my money as a Christian, my energy, my life experience, my health, or even my sickness, my time, my friends, my family, my church, my life, this planet. but I have been entrusted with them temporarily while it's my turn on planet Earth. So what am I going to do with that responsibility? What am I going to do with those resources? I tried to tell the people at Service New South Wales that the owner of my car was God, spelt G-O-D. It's not hard, come on. I didn't. I'm making that up, but it would be fun to do one day, wouldn't it? Look, I'm just the caretaker, okay? The owner is God. Now put it down. Street address, every street in the world. It won't fit in the boxes. You have to give me a street address. All right. Put my name and my street address then. I will be responsible for it being roadworthy, that it gets its pink and green slips, and that it's driven safely and appropriately, and that it's lent out and used for worthwhile projects and not as a getaway car for a bank robbery. I can do the same, not just for my car, but for my time, my energy, my brain, my hopes, my dreams, my lawnmower. I don't have a lawnmower at the moment, but if I had one, I could ask those same questions. In the last few weeks of being talking about these things and listening to Marg and Andrew and reading about them, I thought one of the really practical questions I need to ask myself, and here's me, I'm sitting down there, I'm preaching to me now, is what are the hurdles that I put up to stop me being generous? And I mean specifically generous with money, but we'll talk about the other kinds of generosity in a minute. And here's my list of excuses. Hurdles I create to slow down generosity. Is it readable? Yep. First one, I don't have enough money left over to be generous. Yeah, well, that's just rubbish at the moment, isn't it? There was certainly a time in my life when money had to be counted very carefully, and there was that long period between leaving high school and getting the first doctor's paycheck. You know, it was 16 years. I was a very slow learner. You're supposed to laugh with that, sorry. Wake up, everybody. Don't count back from 10. I'll try again. Took 16 years. I was a very slow learner. Yeah, thanks. So there were certainly times in that period when the leftover to be generous really amounted to buying a mate a milkshake or something pretty small. And I was really well looked after by my friends in that period of time too. I had one friend who was a very complicated person and, you know, made lots of silly mistakes in life, but he was just adamant that I've got a job, you don't, or you're a student, or you've got a part-time job or whatever, I'm paying for everything. And I tried a couple of times to do the right thing, and I gave up. And he was just, I'm happy, you're happy, let's just go out and enjoy the evening. And for years and years and years, he just was so generous to me. Another thing that's biased me. You know, 2 Corinthians 9:11, it's not up on the screen, but 2 Corinthians 9:11 basically says, you will always have enough to be generous. You will always have enough to be generous. Second one, it's not my gift. That's a pretty weak excuse, isn't it? Look, people who have the gift of giving, they're just so nice to be around because mostly, in my personal experience, they're not just good about giving out money and their spare time and stuff, they're just generous people. You can't insult them in a way, you know, because they're so ready to forgive because they've got that generous spirit of, I can see the world through your eyes and you didn't really mean the thing that you said, did you? And, you know, you were tired on the day and come on, let's go out and have some fun. Generous people have the gift of generosity. And in Romans 12, in verse 8, it says, if you've got the gift, then give cheerfully, give generously. And so there are people who have that gift to be generous, not just with money, but with their spirit and everything else. And they're just great fun to be around. Their love language often is gift giving. We have a friend whose love language is gift giving to such a point it's like, stop giving us stuff. Unless we can eat it, that's okay, because we live in a flat. There's not enough, we can't, you know, really fit a 7th jigsaw. But we can fit a 7th jigsaw. These people remind me of God's nature, and it's a wonderful gift that they have and that brightens people around them. But as an excuse for me not giving, it's irrelevant. Yeah, it's irrelevant. It's like the gift of encouragement. Some people just have the gift of encouragement. You know, they walk in the foyer, they're still 20 metres away, you haven't even met eyes yet, and somehow you're more convinced you want to be a Christian just because they walked in. And that's a great gift, isn't it? But we're all told to encourage each other, not just the people who are gifted at it. We're all told to be generous, not just the people who are gifted in being generous. Second excuse, very poor. My third excuse, I too quickly spiritualise or emotionalise it. I don't know if emotionalise is a word, but from now on it is a word, okay? In that, we talked before about how I'm talking about money, but it does spill into other things like my time, my energy, my ability to be empathetic with people. And I quickly move on to those things, just like Jesus teaching about it being terribly bad for you to be rich if you're interested in entering the kingdom of heaven. I quickly move on to, but all things are possible with God. With a generosity one, I quickly leave the money side of it and move on to the next bit about time and energy and other things. So it's true, those other things are really important, but don't skip the hard cash side of it. Number 4, well, it's the rich who should be making the donations. Gina Reinhardt should be doing this. She needs to be here. Dick Smith, Elon Musk, they're the people who should be generous. Yeah, can't argue with that. They should be. But my bank account's got my name on it. I can't sign cheques for Gina Reinhardt. You know, the question is, what am I going to do with my resources, not what she's going to do with hers. So I'd give 0 out of 10 for that excuse. I was very encouraged in preparing for this talk to read about, in America, every now and again, there's people who call themselves reverse tithers. So tithe is the Old Testament way of saying you take 10% out of whatever your income is and you give it to somebody who needs it, but not yourself. And the 90% left over is for you and your family. And there's reverse tithers apparently that come every now and again in America. And these are people who they won the lotto, or they inherited a huge amount of money, or they were just really good at business and succeeded outrageously well. And then they look at it and go, well, I can actually feed, house and educate and have holidays with my family on 10% of what we're making at the moment, so I'll give 90% away. And how inspiring is that? That's just fantastic. Next excuse, the charity or the church or the mission organisation or the NGO or the poor person I'm going to directly give it to, they'll waste it. And there is some truth in this. You know, this isn't a 0 out of 10 excuse. But it's true, isn't it? You know, there's some charities, once you do the homework, you find out that, of the $1 that you gave, 85 cents of it goes towards administration and 5% of it goes towards laptops and whatever and glossy magazines, and 3% at the end goes to the whales that you want to save or the surf life saving that you would like to see happen or something, and it's all lost in the kind of admin costs. And so that's true for some things. But it shouldn't stop us trying to find that kind of information out, and it shouldn't stop us when we're involved in an organisation like we're involved here at Mayfield Baptist having a say and saying, I think this is a good thing that we should do with the money that we've gathered up. Others might be able to tell stories about this, but I can think of organisations that started out very small, just a bunch of volunteers who got together on Saturday mornings in their free time and did something they thought was important. Fixing up some local land care type situation, for example, or looking after some people who struggle to look after themselves or whatever. And the organisation is successful. And people go, can I join on that? Yeah, come on Saturday morning, you can join too. And it grows and it grows and it grows, and eventually it grows big enough to someone says, look, we're so big now, we really probably should have an employee and an office and a laptop and stuff. And then the real focus of what's going on starts to get a bit lost, and you get complicated because, well, you know, we're all free on Saturday morning, but is it okay to ask the employee to turn up on a Saturday when it's really their weekend? And I remember a meeting I went to once to find out what happened to all these small organisations, and the whole day was about how to get government funding, basically. And I kept thinking, I just want someone to tell me what they're doing about their interesting organisation. They've started off as a ground roots thing and has ended up sort of bogged down in how can we get funding, how can we get the government to contribute, etc. And that's sad, but it shouldn't stop me reaching for my wallet too. Is everyone still awake, or enough people still awake for me to continue? No one's counting back from 10 or anything. I don't want to typecast myself, but let's talk about anatomy. For me personally, in my journey, I think I can learn these things that we've all been talking about over the last few weeks and this morning over the last 20 minutes, so that I start to think more clearly and go, yep, I'm here temporarily on this planet. The resources that have been given to me, the education that's been given to me, the personal experiences that have been given to me are on loan. I've just got them for a short time till my turn on the planet's finished. How will I use them to build God's kingdom? And that's a great question to ask. So I can start to think more clearly about these things and to hold very loosely onto the things that rust and go mouldy and the earthly treasures, and hold tightly to the things that are going to be forever stuff. And I can start to think more clearly about these things. And I can even start to talk, as I hope I have been talking in the last 20 minutes, more clearly about these things. So I can think the thoughts and talk the talks. And here's one little just fun thing. Language matters sometimes, and just a little trick you can play for yourself if you are lucky enough to be a car owner is to say, yeah, look, I parked in a 1 hour zone, I've got to go and move my car. Change it to, I parked in the wrong spot, I've got to go and move the car. It's tiny, isn't it? It's baby steps. But, you know, if you're in rehab after a big accident, you don't start with a marathon, you start with baby steps. I don't recommend you do it with your kids, although plenty do. Got to go and pick up the kids. Yesterday they were my kids, but today they're really naughty, so they're the kids. But we can start to talk the talk in a way that's more aligning with what God wants of us as followers of Jesus. But then we come back to my big fat Greek wedding, the neck. And I realise I picked the wrong analogy, didn't I? Because in my big fat Greek wedding, the neck was the answer to the problem. Where I am saying that, me personally, my neck is part of the problem. That I can think the thoughts and talk the talks, but am I going to walk the walk? And if you fractured your neck, you're not walking anywhere. And if there's a constriction here, the other things that matter, what am I going to do with my hands and my feet? Am I going to reach here easily and quickly when a need is arising? And not just what am I going to do with my hands and my feet, but what about my guts and my heart, which we're not talking pure anatomy here, you know, atria and ventricles and whatever. But in English, we talk about the real us, the thing that, our spirit, the thing that drives us. We locate it here, even though it's just a pump, but that's the way we talk about it. We locate it here. There's lots and lots of commands in the Bible. Very few of them are actually emotional commands. They're more like practical things. Don't steal, don't murder, don't make a false image, don't bow down to another god. But there's occasionally an emotional command. Don't covet. Old King James version of don't be jealous of other people. Don't want what your neighbour's, don't covet your neighbour's donkey, which I've never fallen into, I'm proud to say. But it's about feeling. Yeah, so there's a command to feel a certain way, think a certain way, to feel a certain way. And if you're going to give it cheerfully, give it enthusiastically. So I reckon the neck is my problem, because it's the journey between thinking clearly and talking the talk and walking the walk. The book of James, doesn't he just go on and on and on about the fact that if you're going to talk the talk, you've got to walk the walk. And if you don't do the things, then your talk's useless. Your faith is dead. You need a new faith first, and then get on with the actions. So what should we do? You'll be pleased to hear I'm nearly finished. That's a cue for the band to wake up if you've been asleep. Let's think clearly about the truth. All we have really does belong to God. We really just are caretakers, stewards. We've been entrusted with this resources. Let's ask God to make us wiser about remembering that and trying to figure out how can I use my resources to grow his kingdom. Talk in a way that reminds you, even if it's the little baby talk of the car instead of my car, but talk in a way that reminds you that all we have belongs to God. Seek first the kingdom of God, remembering that being wealthy is a disadvantage for seeking first the kingdom of God. It's a disadvantage. Don't store up treasure here. Learn the concept of enough, something our society knows just about zero about. Think about your caretaker status. Pray for your neck and pray for your list of hurdles, whatever it is. I confess mine this morning. That the things that are true here will end up here and here. Which is a great place to stop, isn't it? Enough talk, let's just do it.